Right. Okay. So I think we're starting. All right. Good morning. My name is Darcy Jarrett, and I am one of the pastors of Park Avenue Baptist Church. We are going live, and we have with us today Liz Hutchinson, who holds a very big corner of my own heart and is also a part of the team at Park Ave. And so in this month of May, that is Mental Health Awareness Month. She just heard her name, May. And we want to highlight and to talk about and to center the topic of mental health awareness, and in an effort to end the stigma that exists in so many circles. And so when in our preparing for this month of programming and everything, I was in a meeting with Pastor Henra and Jamie Gethers, our other administrator and part of the team, and Liz. And Jamie came up with the idea of centering Mental Health Awareness Month, which is so right on point for us. So many of us in the congregation, myself included, live with and thrive with mental illness. And so Jamie has some experience, and we had her on last week, and it was such a great conversation. And Liz also is an amazing scholar, aspiring counselor, and just amazing human being. So Liz, thank you for coming on. Thank you so much. Will you tell us a little bit about who you are? People know you because you've been doing so much and such a part of our community. But give us your buy-in to this convo if you want.
Oh, well, let's see. I'm 27. Oh, yes. I had to think about my age for 2 seconds. Let's see. I've lived in Atlanta for a little over a year and a half now. I just graduated with my bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of Wyoming. So that means I've lived a lot of places and traveled across the U.S. quite a bit across my life. Um, I am working towards getting into a clinical mental health counseling program at Mercer University here in Atlanta, which is a Baptist university. So there's always the option of the seminary dual degree in my back pocket. um,
Love
our
it.
our dear Nikki Hardeman has been trying to get me to go to seminary there.
I
Um,
love it.
and Kyle, who is my husband and partner, has also been like, "Are you sure you don't want to get that seminary degree right there?" Um,
He's so
so
supportive.
he is. He's incredibly supportive of my many years of schooling. But I'm really excited to begin practicing and working in the clinical area rather than just being in school. Because I've been in school I started putting myself back through for my bachelor's in 2016, which isn't a long time, but in a way it feels like a long time because I had gone to school previously and started a different career and had a whole life going. And then I left that career and started putting myself back through school, knowing I would have to get a master's to become a counselor. Like I knew that, okay, I got to get a master's,
Mhm.
but I got to get a bachelor's first. So
Right.
that's been a journey, and I really love learning. I didn't realize I loved academics until I was in academics and just being surrounded by opportunity. So for the fun of it, I guess I'm an English lit minor as well. So a lot of my elective
And you
classes
are a
are
wordsmith. That's
yes,
what I always say. You're amazing. Quite a
yeah.
writer.
So a lot of my electives have been in the English lit department, and I've met some incredible professors and learned. I mean, it's honestly because of an English lit course that I was able to come to the realization or begin to realize my queer identity because of that course and that professor. So, yeah, I've had some really cool opportunities across my education, and as my education and spiritual self were developing kind of hand in hand, I realized that it's a personal and professional goal of mine to reform the conversation of mental health within the church. And personally, that looks like me as a churchgoer and Christian just being very open about my struggles and my journey, and not being ashamed of the fact that I am on medication and that it helps me to be a grounded, happier, healthier person.
And
Not
that's what
being,
God wants you to be,
yeah, I mean,
right? You
God
deserve
gave us
that.
the resources.
Right.
Being open with people about how I've had a lot of mental health downs across my life, and not being ashamed of that, and not trying to paint it in a, well, I was really depressed and I thought about taking my life, but I was also living in sin. Like, not trying to create that narrative either. Um, and I think
Exactly.
that the
Exactly. And that's harmful. I mean,
oh yeah,
if you think about it like that. Hmm.
the biggest, I think the biggest reason it's so important to me is because it's unclear to me, and the counselor who I currently see, it's impossible for either of us to determine when I started battling both anxiety and depression, because I didn't have the language for it until I was about 22 or 23 years old.
Hmm.
So I acquired the language then, but we don't know how long it had been a thing in my life. And I don't want, the next little Liz to grow up that same way without that language and without the resources to take care of themselves. And I have lots of friends with a similar story, and
Hmm.
that's why it's what's very important to me.
Yes, yes. And that's so many people's stories in so many different ways. Um, and so if we can, as a congregation and as a church, just reach one person to say, your mental illness, your how you need to cope with your mental health has nothing to do with how faithful you are, and that
Yep.
above and beyond that, you are a loved whole human being wherever you find yourself on that journey. And I mean, I would love to dig into whatever wherever you want to go with this conversation, Liz. But I do think of you, and I lean on you really as a human being and a resource for so many that need to go through this deconstruction of harmful theology. I think, and on some level, everyone needs that, right?
Yeah.
Everyone has heard these things. Um,
And
I
also
think you,
deconstruction stretches to the messages that we're given from social systems, regardless of religion.
exactly, decolonizing.
A lot of folks start with, especially if you're coming from a Christian background, you start with deconstructing your religion and your theology. But then if you're open and willing to listen, you realize how much religion, theology, and social systems are all intertwined and interconnected, and how they impact each other. And then you begin to realize to deconstruct the world around you, in a sense, breaking it down, breaking down the messages you've been given to their barest form.
Mhm. Mhm, absolutely, and I think, um, like so many right now, you have come through to the other side, and we're always becoming, right?
Yes.
But you've come through a church system that really fed you some toxic stuff. I was telling you that I was thinking about you yesterday, because I was listening about some of the messages from home church movements, particularly in the like Midwest
Yep.
to Northwest, and and if you feel comfortable, maybe share a little bit of where you've come from. Again, within whatever your comfort level is. And I'll also share about my own stuff too. This isn't a one-way
I
street.
mean, I'm happy to share anything. I'm not afraid to talk about it anymore, because I don't really care what people are going to see on Facebook, or the possible like fallout, or like who's going to tell on me or something. That doesn't matter to me anymore.
Right.
And I think it's important to tell
That's
these
powerful.
stories, because the more I tell them, the more I realize that other people have a very similar story, and they felt incredibly alone until they met me or someone like me who was willing to
Hmm.
tell. So what
Thank you.
Darcy's referring to is, I'm going to guess, God is Gray, who it's a YouTube channel and movement ran by a woman named Brenda. If you don't know it, watch it. She's incredible. Brenda just released a video a few days ago on the How to Train Up a Child movement, and the violent fallout of that. And I didn't actually watch it all because it hit too close to home. I got about 10 minutes
very
in.
Emotional.
I got 10 minutes in and I wasn't able to watch it, and I probably won't. Not because her content isn't amazing, it is. It's just it hit way too close to home. So,
and it's very positive in its spin. You know, it's very much not. There's no vitriol there.
Yeah.
But yes, please continue.
She's really good at that, at calling people out for the harm that they're doing without causing hate or shame or vitriol towards that individual. She's very, very talented at that. So How to Train Up a Child is a very infamous book that still exists. It's still in print. It's still sold on Amazon. They've actually changed the cover to make it more attractive to keep it selling. And it is in its nature a very violent parenting book on basically how to control your children so that they do anything and everything that you tell them to. And it is extreme in its nature, and I do not use those words lightly. I feel like
you're not exaggerating at all.
Yeah. I feel like the word extreme gets tossed around a lot these days, and I try to use it very purposefully. One of the examples from the book that I remember being read to me, thank the Lord I was old enough that this training tip couldn't have been used on me because it had to do with potty training. So trigger warning for parents or people who survived this. It was about potty training and a child essentially refusing to poop in the toilet, which, as any parent knows, is a uphill, mountainous battle. My heart goes out to you. Can't imagine. But the answer in this book was you need to associate for the child, you need to create an association for them of if they go in their diaper, they're going to experience severe discomfort. So if they go in their diaper, you take them out back, no matter what the weather is, and hose them down with the cold water hose. So that you create an association in their brain, which affects their brain wiring for the rest of their life until that becomes unwired with therapy and rewired correctly, that there is a association of pain and discomfort with their diaper on their person. So the other tip was when you are changing the baby's diaper from however young they are, so you begin that association as early as possible. You do not coo, you do not cuddle, you do not comfort, you do not kiss the baby at all when you're changing their diaper. Because if you create a positive association with their diaper, that's going to be harder to get them out of their diaper when they're older and ready to potty train.
Wow.
And that's just one example.
That's the extreme example. And any bad behavior in the theological realm, any bad behavior is associated with sin. Sin, you know, and little people, I mean, there's evidence and research now. You have a full spectrum of emotions when you are a young person and not the language or brain capacity to understand. So imagine, just imagine if I felt how I felt in my 20s when I was little, and in my 20s, you know, I could explain it at least endlessly, obviously. But yeah, so and Lizz, thank God that you survived. My God. You know, it's and I think about this really often, particularly when I'm at Park Ave, when I'm in this space, when I'm surrounded by miracles like you, that it is a miracle. It is a miracle and an act of bravery and courage for you to step into and to continue a faith system that was wielded so, you know, so violently against you. And so
I think,
sorry, keep going.
On top of that too, I'd like to acknowledge that I find a type of calling, maybe mission, maybe I don't know what word we want to use here, but I find it extra important for me to tell my story because not everybody I was raised with made it out alive. And want to be vulnerable with my own story for the sake of their memory and their life as well, because their stories they can't tell their story anymore.
Right.
And there are some of us who are working together to tell a story to make sure that those folks are not just not forgotten,
Right.
um
But
with
learned that we can learn from that.
yeah.
Well, thank you. Thanks for being willing to come on
Yeah.
and to talk about this. You are a joyful human, and that's the thing is, the spirit shines from you so hard. It's like you can't deny that it's there and present, and you can tell that you are motivated through and by that. And then even to be in the vocational path that you are, to become a counselor and a therapist that's able to pass that on, knowing how much that has been your lifeline. Do you want to talk about the process of sort of coming to this call? I mean, that's such a huge topic, but how did you even get into therapy
So
first?
okay. I My story
Huge
is
story.
long. Yeah, yeah. So
I love
I'm
your
going
stories.
to
We got
thank
time.
you. Thank you. So it was 2016. I In the spring of that year, a lot of my life, or what I would say, a lot of what I had built in my life was living in Columbus, Ohio, was crumbling around me. In a very real way, but I would also say a very um I don't like the word stereotype here. A very normal way for someone who's 23 years old. I feel
Okay.
like when in that first half of your 20s, you go through immense shifting and learning and loss and growth. And it was one of those
Mhm.
seasons.
Well, and they say developmentally that, like, at that time you have this capacity in order to sort of reconstruct in your
Yeah,
brain, right? Like you can think long term and make these connections that perhaps and that's just the research, but that you might not be able to do in your
yeah,
late teens.
yeah, exactly. So I was facing that season. I had left the career that I was in the fall previous. So coming into the spring, through a journey that I'd taken, which is a whole other story, I ended up taking a summer camp counselor job in the mountains in the state of Wyoming in this tiny little town called Centennial. And I was, packing up to leave. And when I originally left for Centennial, I had every plan on coming back to Columbus. I had a job waiting for me. I had an apartment waiting for me. It was going to be my first apartment living alone ever. I had a boyfriend waiting for me. I had a church community, all these things. Within 2 weeks of getting to Wyoming, the boyfriend I was with, it was a long-term relationship. We broke up.
Mm,
It was very much a dodge bullet situation. It was a very messy, toxic, just messy relationship.
mm.
Um, and that was really painful for a lot of reasons. He was my first serious, actual boyfriend ever across my life, because that was another facet of growing up. I wasn't allowed to date ever.
Purity culture, yeah, we
Yeah,
that's all
yeah, purity culture to the far right.
to the extreme. Mhm.
Yeah, so that was really difficult for a lot of reasons, but I was in Wyoming and I was having this restart in my life. And the reason I went to this camp was because I had never been allowed to go to camp as a child and I always wanted to go. And I thought, if I force myself into a situation I've never been in before, it's going to show my strengths and weaknesses in a way I've never known before. It's going to force these things out of me that I didn't know were there, which is why I went. And it was an incredible experience. One of the best singular summers, I think, of my life for a lot of reasons. And everyone at camp knew that I was thinking about going back to school and I was praying about it and like trying to, discern what to do, what not to do. So everyone was supporting me in that journey. And um, I had plans to go home and attend Ohio State University and that kind of stuff. So as the summer went, there was this period of, I think it was like a 1 week period where four people completely independently of each other came to me and said, I know you've been thinking about going back to school. I see how you interact on a one-on-one level with campers and staff alike. And it's so deep and it's so personal. You should look into counseling. And when the fourth person said that,
Wow.
hold up.
There's a
Jesus is speaking.
connection.
Hang on. Hold on.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so
and
there's
even the way that you challenged yourself and recognized that putting yourself in new experiences would be a way to broaden your own experience. I mean, that is very, I bet it's a certain type of mental health sort of treatment, but that is a really systematic and healthy way to think about
I
your own
learned
experiences.
so much about my personality, my body, my limitations, my capabilities that summer. So much. So many lessons that I can still say, like, yep, that's still helping me right now.
And you were caring for little Liz. Little Liz didn't get to go to camp. They wanted that experience. And so have that experience. I think that's beautiful. I think learning new things and having new experiences is paramount in keeping our minds open.
Yeah. And that, oh gosh, you just reminded me. There was a meme that was floating around Instagram a while ago. It was a quote about how when we were little and we were enduring that thing and we prayed for a savior, who would have thought it would be us as our adult selves?
Mm-hmm.
Healing
Wow.
our childhood selves and looking back at our little selves and saying, I'm doing this for you. Like
I
from the
love and accept you.
for the bigger things like going to camp, or like the tiny thing that my husband bought me a Winnie the Pooh bear with my childhood name on him because I never got to own a Winnie the Pooh bear as a kid. And just like every time I hold the little Winnie the Pooh, I'm like, this is going to my child. Like this hug is to little Liz and what she went through.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Totally.
so
Totally.
so that experience at camp, I was like, all
So
right,
people were just telling you
yeah.
this
And
is in
then
you. Beautiful.
I reached out to some friends who were and are still working in mental health, and they both went to the same school in Ohio, a seminary up in, oh gosh, what was the name of that seminary? Because when I was still planning on moving back, I was looking into that seminary. And my one friend, he said something that when he was in a similar place than I was just later in years in life, where he was like, what the hell am I doing? Like, I don't actually like this job, but I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. He said, I looked back at every single job and experience I had ever held, and I asked myself, what was the one constant across all those variety of jobs that made me love it? And he realized his constant was those close, one-on-one, vulnerable conversations where he had always been the listening ear, always the empathic listener for every friend and everything they'd ever been through. And he said, that was so normal for me. I thought it was normal for everyone. But I found out it's
Right.
not.
It's
Not
not.
everybody
It's
is
not.
that friend. And when he said that, I was like, not everybody? That's unusual? Because that's me too. And so he kind of walked me through, like, think about that. Think about every job you've ever had and what's that one constant. And it was the same thing for me. And I look at it now, like through school, I've been a barista a lot, and my barista jobs have been at different companies, but it's still that same constant thread. Yeah, I love coffee. Coffee is amazing. But the constant thread isn't the coffee. It's the one on, yep,
People.
got my little recycle mug. Um, it's the people, it's the relationship that I build with my regulars across the
Right.
counter, making them feel seen and valued every morning and that kind of stuff. And that, like, just there was many signs of affirmation. And then
Mm-hmm.
even as I got to school and I was like, okay, I'm just going to go ahead and get my bachelor's in psychology, there's still room to wiggle there with electives and um, specialty psychology courses. And the electives that I would take that were like outside of the bounds, so to speak, just reminded me, like, no, this is where I actually want to be.
Right.
And this is affirming to what I actually want to do when I have to pick a master's degree.
That's so great.
And
That's
the other day I was giving advice to a friend, and I was reiterating the advice to a marriage counselor, just telling them about my day. And he was like, I sure hope you're charging for that advice. You need a copay. I was like, oh, thank you.
Teacher's pet.
Yeah. No,
That's how I am in counseling too. I'm like, let me tell you this thing.
there's no A in therapy, you guys. Don't go.
There isn't.
No,
It's true.
no. I get it, but no.
It's true. It's true. So, yes. Well, Liz, I mean, just that whole call story is it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And so even and already at that point in your early 20s, you were saying to a system that had, and I'm assuming this, and I think it's true, that had said female bodied people can't speak in church, right? And you were already saying, no, I think I might go to seminary, and I think so talk us through, I don't know, I just want to know, and I think the answer is spirit and God and a connection to positivity and self-care that you clearly have. I mean, you clearly had at the beginning of that time, right? But to in the face of a system that has said you are built for one thing, and that is to be a wife and a mother, to say, actually, I'm more than that. What
Yeah.
I mean, so many people are living in the world thinking that, and that's a fulfilling purpose if that's what you choose for yourself,
Yes.
right?
Good
Complete,
keyword choice.
right.
It's something that I get exhausted of as a feminist. People are like, "Oh, feminists hate stay-at-home moms." It's like, no, no, no. I don't hate stay-at-home moms. I hate the systems that tell a person that's all you can do.
Right.
And I know many strong, powerful feminist women who have chosen to be a stay-at-home mom, and they are thriving in their choice. And I think that's incredible, and I support them. That's what I hate, is a system that says this is all that you
You
can do.
must
And
do that,
it's
right?
in the same breath, I hate the system that tells the man that says all you can do is be the breadwinner. You don't
Mhm.
get to stay home. That's your wife's job.
Or you
I
don't get
mean,
to have emotions,
or you
and
don't
you don't
get to
get
have
to,
emotions.
right. Hmm.
Like I think the equality in a partnership where both spouses get to fully choose what they do and do not want to do is amazing. Sometimes those choices in the United States, due to economic disparity, inequality,
Hmm.
aren't as great as they could be and should be. But I just wanted to take a second with that, because I think that that's a message that sometimes comes out of feminism, sometimes on accident, sometimes on purpose. I just wanted to clarify.
Well, but I think you're tapping into a larger theological concept, which I hope that I reiterate as much as I think I do, which is our God is a God of consent.
Mm,
Consent. And consent is a primary way that I think we need to function in the world. Is it okay if I give you a hug? Consent. Is it okay, if I ask you this question, kind of like what we were saying before this interview? And I think we see that modeled in the Bible, and in good literature, let's say, in the canon of the world,
mhm.
where asks, God asks Mary, and
Yes.
and nothing would happen unless there was that yes, and that that joyful yes is lovely, and when we can say no, our yeses can actually mean yes.
Yep.
So that's my sidebar.
Enthusiastic informed consent.
Exactly. And well, and I think also what we started to talk about, which unsurprisingly to non-binary identifying human beings, we'll talk about, the violence that happens in the binary, and in this either or, you must be like this or you must be like this, and so I think all examples of people living outside of that, whether they decide that they're affirmed by they them pronouns or not, every act of being outside of the binary, I think, is a radical act. And I was lucky enough to be raised with a mom who was very much, the handy person, and the hands-on, the tactile person, and I see those acts as living outside of the binary. do you want to talk about sort of your, I mean, wherever that strikes you, you know, being raised in such a tight binary and a very restrictive binary. How did that affect you? I guess, how do you cope with that in the present? Because I want to focus on, ways that we have healing narratives, and I think you have so many. So
Oh, thank you.
um so yeah. What
So
was that like?
growing up, it was very second nature and easy for me to be a people pleaser, and still is. And that's something that, through therapy and healing and working through in terms of creating boundaries, which Darcy, you've helped me a lot with work, to create and maintain good boundaries in our work relationship at church. So I was a very, very good rule follower. So in the system, the church, not really a church, a cult, the cult that I was raised in, I was the pastor's kid. My dad was second in charge there. And so, the lens was on me and my siblings big time. And it just made sense for me to follow all the rules super duper carefully, because I saw what happened to people who didn't follow the rules.
Mm.
So there was that fear element there as well, the fear of consequence, which, kind of circling back to the child training thing, that's not actually training your child to just make them afraid of a consequence. You're not teaching your child to make good informed decisions when they grow up. They're just going to go through their lives being afraid of the consequence. Or they're going to say, screw the consequences. I'm going to do the really unhealthy, bad, dangerous thing because I'm tired of being afraid of the consequence.
Mm-hmm.
Which we see that a lot in youth that come out of really, really restrictive homes, is they just have this like crazy rebellious period where they make lots of bad decisions. So I was too afraid to have that like crazy rebellious period. But so it was easy to exist within the binaries that were handed to me so that I could survive. But the older I got, the more I realized I didn't fit any box, actually, that had ever been given me. I was watching Nadia Boltweber and Caitlin Curtis the other night on Instagram, and Nadia put it really well. And she was like, I was handed one of those lists that were like the feminine traits of the spirit. And she was like, oh shit, I can't cross any of this off. Like none of these apply to me. I'm not feminine at all. I'm failing at being a woman in the church. So it was like, okay, I can pretend and I can go along with this to survive and get by, but this isn't actually who I am, like, at all. Which
and
is,
so there becomes like an erasure of self in that identity.
It just for the sake of survival. And then I went through like a kind of another version of that as I was an adult and moved away from home, and I worked in restaurants for a career, and that was another level of erasure, because it was like I gotta be super tough, and I gotta be a hard ass, and I gotta be mean, and I gotta be nasty, and I have to, go along or get along to survive, and I gotta be this like other really hard, like super hard version of myself, which wasn't me at all either. Which again, that led me to the whole camp experience. Was like, I don't know who I actually am. I've been living in other people's prescribed notions for so long. Like I was like, I look in the mirror and don't recognize myself, because I've just been a chameleon to anyone's needs, is essentially what it looked like. So that whole process of moving to Wyoming and launching myself into that was just a huge exercise in independence. And the longer that I had that experience, the more I was able to just see these things grow out of me and realize like, oh, I don't fit that narrative, and I don't fit that narrative, but I fit this one, and this is the one that God made me to be, and that's really cool. And I think strangely, one of the keys that like created an early like snap was when I was 21, I think, between 21 and 22. And I remember I was walking home from work. I was walking up my gross alley because I lived in a gross apartment, and I just started crying because I was like, I was supposed to get married at 18 and I didn't. I must be broken.
Hmm.
I was supposed to, start courting someone when I was 16 and get engaged and get married when I was 18. That didn't happen. I must be broken. What did I do wrong? Was I not attractive enough? Was I not a good enough Christian?
Hmm.
Whatever, the whole list. And as I kind of sat with that, God spoke to me. He was like, that's not your story. I have a different story written for you. And I was like, okay. um,
Mm-hmm.
and that keyed me into the I don't fit these boxes very, very early, so to speak, because I was like, if I didn't fit them, does that mean I'm broken? But God's saying I'm not broken. So then what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it means that I'm an individual. And he created a different story for me. So I kind of lean into that of I have a different story for you. And I
Mm-hmm.
said, okay, well then what's it gonna be?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like your posture of openness, this idea, and I'm biased. That's kind of been my focus for the last um couple weeks has just been approaching the world with like curiosity and approaching those in my world, right?
Oh my gosh,
Um
curiosity is so beautiful. And that was another thing that was completely stamped out of me because it was like if you question anything, you're in sin. And
right.
if you have any form of doubt, you're in sin. Which is
Right.
so sad because there's so many examples in scripture of people wrestling. Literally, Jacob wrestled
Mm-hmm.
with God. This process of wrestling and sitting in the really uncomfortable gray of God is gray of it. I don't have a yes or no, a black or white answer, and I have to sit with this and be okay with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think thinking about God as a mystery and this
Mm.
relationship with God as a mystery, um, and not a mystery that is to be solved. I'm also reading Richard Rohr's book on the Trinity called The Divine Dance, and he defines mystery not as something that has a solution, but as something that you never stop questioning. So it's so big, and I think that that's also identity. I often, I'm a process. I ascribe to process theology. And so I do believe that this mystery that is God is becoming. God is growing and evolving and seeks to have experience you know,
We
through us. And we also are in that process.
we
Go ahead.
literally see that play out across scripture.
Oh yeah.
Scripture is the story of a people wrestling with who is God, who am I, and who am I in relation to God, and vice versa. And we see their evolution of their understanding of themselves, of God, of the relationship that's back and forth across the scripture. And even when scripture ends, I would be a heretic and say it's actually not ending. We're still in that. Like we may not ever add anything to the canon, but we're still in that process of who am I, who is God, what is our relationship together, and
Mm-hmm.
it's continually evolving. And I think that's so beautiful because at the same time, you can also still hold the truth that God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Just because our understanding of who God is shifts and evolves and grows doesn't mean that God is changing. It just means that we're digging in a little deeper, stretching ourselves, asking harder questions.
Yeah, and I do think as we talk about decolonizing our own ways of knowing and being, that the idea that there's one way to understand anything is something that is rooted um this Eurocentric white supremacist idea of what education and what knowing and knowledge has been over the years. So
Yep.
I want to bring us back because I think we could go off. You and
Oh
I
yeah.
go
Hours
off
later.
right here.
2
But
p.m.
we're not talking about how we cope with mental illness, which is kind of, again, if you go to Park Ave, you know that we center this often, not just in the month of May. But what are the ways, and maybe I'll answer this question for me just because I want to be vulnerable too. I think part of the ways that I stay in the solution, whether that's in my recovery from addiction or my recovery with mental illness, is to stay vulnerable and to stay at a place where I'm sharing and being transparent in appropriate ways, obviously. But so, what are I would say, the ways that I continue to move toward growing and becoming are through therapy,
Mhm.
through meetings, through transparency, and recently, like I said, through this curiosity. I um I love also, and something that really does help me is to ask and understand and get into other people. One of our deacons, Lindsay Huggins, and I kid and our real in our spiritual gift of enthusiasm. That's what we have
Oh my gosh,
for
Lindsay
for
is
the
so
world.
enthusiastic.
Yes. Yes. And so I think part of how I stay in in my own solution and in a positive way is to say, wow, look at Liz and look at Liz's journey. And let me really think about how that is inspiring and how I can be encouraging for them on their journey. And I think that, that can tend into being more like the work is done inside of me, right? But how it comes out, I think, is often in that way. So what are the ways that you find that are healing, and that you use to stay in recovery and cope when those low moments happen, which that's life, right?
Yeah, I mean that's life. Like being completely vulnerable. I've had a rough few days. This week has been awful. um, and that's the thing with mental health is that I think especially with some of the social attitudes of culture in the United States, we want to look at mental health as a cast or a band-aid. We want to say, okay, I've put your brain in this cast now, and in 8 weeks we're going to take it off, and then you'll be fine. Or okay, you've been on medication for 6 months, you're probably fine now. Let's take you off. And that's not how it works at all. Um, it is a process. Therapy and healing don't happen overnight.
Mm-hmm.
So when a low moment comes, there can be a sense of shame of like, oh, I've reverted back to the negative. I've reverted backwards. Like I
Right.
did,
Or relapse.
I
And it's
or
like,
relapse, or like I disassociated. Like I'm not supposed to do that. I'm trying to stop doing that. So there's my counselor was like, don't shame yourself because you reverted or use those coping mechanisms that aren't healthy. You're still like we're still moving forward. So for me, one of the big things about a continual healing forward is a strong support system.
mm,
So
yes, thank you for
it's
saying that.
it's people that I can trust and vice versa, who are there with a listening ear, non-judgmental, and who are active in their care for me. So it's not just a listening ear, but it's also checking in. It's, hey, I know you've been having a really rough season. I know this is a rough season. How are you doing? Are
Mhm.
you feeding yourself?
Have you had any vegetables?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you had vegetables? And speaking of support system, my therapist is literally calling me right now to check in on me. But that's okay because I'll just call her back later. It's fine. But And that's a thing that's been really hard with social distancing is my support systems have gone all digital. So rather than having some digital and some in person, it's all digital, which has been really hard. I
For an
told
extrovert
her,
like me.
I told her the other day, I was like, it sucks. I feel like I spent months placing all these support systems in place, and now in a way they've been ripped out from underneath me.
Mm-hmm.
And Darcy and I worked together in a professional setting, but also in that I used to go to your office about once a week and we would talk a mix of life and work. And that was healing to me. I could just sit in your office. I could just relax on your couch and we talk about anything and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And we get that now. We still talk about once a week usually and we work and stuff, but it's just different.
It's different.
And so it's okay. It's active reframing a coping mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
All right, this is a healthy coping mechanism. Now, how do I reframe it to make sure it continues to be successful in this unusual time? That's one of them.
Well, I like what you talked about in terms of overcoming those ideas of like, and I think it's perfectionist thinking, which again is a tenet of white supremacist thinking, is this idea that we're going to be, there is, first of all, that there even is perfection. But that there's one ideal that I need to reach.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm not there, then I'm not perfect. And maybe
or I'm failing.
Go to like I'm broken. Yeah, or failing or
I failed therapy this week. I got an F.
Yeah.
No, you went to therapy. You got an A. You were there.
Right. Well, and I know a big part of your healing are little pets.
Yes, my babies. I mean, so one baby's sleeping on the couch right now. She was barking earlier because she heard somebody outside. Oh my gosh, how dare they walk past our apartment in Midtown Atlanta.
Busy neighborhood.
And then Froggy is in her room. So my pets of animals have been a constant through my life because I was also raised on a farm. So I had a balance of like animals as friends and also animals as utility. So as an adult, having a continual presence of animals has been very important to me. So I've had an animal in my home, I think, since I was 6 years old. I don't think in that time span there's ever been more than like a 6 months without an animal around. And then in the practical ways, May, my dog, literally gets me out of bed. Like last year was really rough on my mental health and I spent a lot of days not getting out of bed. But because May has to go pee outside, guess what? I either got to go get out of bed to take her out to pee or got to get out of bed to clean up her pee.
One or the other.
One or the other, I'm forced out of bed by her. And that can seem like a small thing to someone who might not battle depression. But when you're in those low moments, getting out of bed is like, it can feel like climbing a mountain some days because it's like, what's the point of getting out of bed? I have no appetite, so I'm not getting out of bed to eat. I don't have the energy to shower, whatever. So the fact that she just gets me moving, and even if I just go sit right back down, she got me outside. And then just her own journey as a dog too is very healing to me because in a lot of ways she gives me a second chance as a dog parent, because growing up I had a dog in my childhood dog and I was really unfair to her, and that I have to forgive my childhood self because my system wasn't fair to me either. So I raised her the way I was raised, and I'm very ashamed of the choices I made with her, but at the same time I didn't know better. That's it. I either had to train her a very specific way or she was going to get killed. That threat existed over my head. Right. And so with May, and she was in the pound for a year when we picked her up. That's a lot for a dog to deal with. I've been given a second chance and working with her in a way that honors her brain that God created her with and honors the way that she interacts with the world rather than me forcing an agenda on her and in a behavior out of her based on fear. I want my dog to make the choice to trust me rather than doing what I tell her to because she's afraid of how I might respond if she doesn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very long. It would be much easier to slap a shock collar on her, so much easier. But that's not the point.
Well, yeah, and I see that as you actively, you know, undoing the ways of thinking that were imposed on you.
Yeah, and
That's
then
really
and in
powerful.
the small ways and the big ways, like if I ever become a parent, she's helping me to realize that like, oh, some of that residue is still there, and I can
Absolutely.
work through that. And like one of the things that
I tend to shy away from like exact correlations
yes.
just because, humans, but I do think it's so healing.
One of the things that I do with my animals is if like the cat is yelling at me because she wants something. Instead of yelling at her, I'll take a really deep breath and I'll look at her and I'll say, those are really big feelings for such a little girl. Now let's work through them together. What do you need? so that so that in the future, if I have a toddler who's doing the same thing, that can be my instant reaction. And instead of my instant reaction being, I can't handle this.
Right.
And still there are days where I'm like, oh
It's
my
true
God,
that when
I
we
can't
have
handle
patience,
this.
yeah, it's true that how we treat others, is a manifestation of those tapes that we play in our own minds to ourselves.
Yep.
And I think that uncovering and being aware of those ways of thinking for me it has been a really strong way to live with and cope with addiction. I'm 10 years in recovery with 9 years previously, and those tapes are strong, and so I need to be refuting those actively whenever I can.
Yep. Yeah, that's a cognitive behavioral therapy um, thing, is to examine your internal narrative.
Hold on, my family's about to keep talking. I'm going to stop the video.
Okay. Um, it's called an automatic thought
No,
record,
I stopped the video.
where you have a certain emotion and then paired with a thought, and you record both of them down, and then you examine the thought and you examine the emotion, and then you say, okay, how can I approach this differently next time? And it's really interesting because it gets you to examine why you're feeling and why you're thinking what you're thinking in response to what you're feeling, and to reframe both of them for the next time that situation will happen, because it'll happen all the time. But TBT is a very involved, like homework oriented form of therapy, and it's excellent. It's not necessarily where I'm at. I'm doing
Right.
other things, but a lot of people have said that it's research proven and blah blah blah. So
Yeah, and again, I'm not a trained person, but certainly there are a lot of things that are behavioral things that we've learned and are kind of become wisdom in the recovery community.
yep.
So
Yeah, I mean, I've seen this number repeated constantly, that like of all rehabs and programs and options and blah 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 that exist, AA is proven to be consistently the most effective long-term solution to addiction-related issues. And I think that's interesting because the AA model doesn't strike a lot of folks as particularly clinical or academic. It's just practical, I think, in its function and its use and stuff. Darcy went away.
I'm here. I'm still
Okay.
listening.
It's
My
okay.
apologies.
No, it's okay.
I'm in a common area. That's okay.
Also, it's the pandemic. People on video camera in the background. It's just bound to happen.
It's pandemic. It's pandemic season.
This might be our cue to wrap up.
Yeah, maybe we should wrap up.
We could talk for hours, and I'd miss May's vet appointment at 2. But like,
I know. What was I just gonna say? Yeah, well, and I am in 12-step recovery, but I do think in many ways there's a fundamentalism that is through that message as well, that I have my group, my core group of folks that, we refute that, and we say that, there are many ways to recover in the various ways that we need to recover.
Yep.
And so I think, there's an absolutism that can be found and is helpful for some, and then there's also a way to reduce harm,
Also,
and so reducing harm, meaning, if I'm living with addictions, um to just make that one better decision, one slightly better decision. So if I am, a person who's recovering or who's addicted, in a way that is super harmful to me, what's one way that I can reduce that slightly, and recognizing those victories, and
yes,
those ways of
recognizing the
thinking.
victories. Because recovery, just like grief, recovery and healing are not linear.
Mhm.
They
Exactly.
aren't. And again, like sometimes when I get frustrated with myself on things that I'm healing through, I look at my dog and I'm like, her process isn't linear. There are days where she's 3 steps backwards from the day previous. But I don't get angry at her for that. I say, that's okay, May. We try again tomorrow.
Mhm.
Here's a treat because I know that
And
you
and
tried
having
today.
that same grace with yourself,
Yes,
you
yes, that's
know?
like that's so important. And again, like that's hard as a perfectionist, and then the social messages with that. But and if my best friend, I don't know if she's watching, but when she's repeated that to me for my whole life, like back when I met her when I was 17, I think that's been her motto to me is, Liz, you have got to give yourself more grace.
Yeah,
And
I often say to people who are, stuck in a loop of self-deprecation, like, "Hey, that's my friend you're talking about. Like, that's my
yes,
friend Liz that you were talking about, and I don't think you would ever talk to a small person the way that you talk to you, and I say that to myself too, or I try to.
don't talk about my friend that way.
Yeah, don't talk about my friend that way. Be kind. Be the person that, we are towards others. So,
Amen.
well, Liz, I feel like there were so many nuggets in what we talked about, and so much of your own journey um through the ways that that you came into this world, and the communities that you came into this world to then, really find yourself and make the decisions for yourself to find yourself in a healing community, and in a place where you get to make healing decisions for yourself. And that is redemption. I mean, in so many ways, and I don't mean in some, eschatological way. I do mean, in the way of that is choosing life,
Mm,
and seeing you choose life, it gives life. It really
thank you.
does.
Thank
It
you so
really does.
much.
And getting to be in community with you and with people like you who are choosing that next best decision for themselves is beautiful and
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah. And I mean, shameless plug, but like being able to be at Park Avenue has been its own piece in the journey of spiritual healing too. To be at a church that fully affirms folks exactly where they are. Like I'm gonna quote Aretha. I know she's watching. My favorite quote ever about Park Avenue is every church I'd ever been to before this, I had to choose either my gayness or my blackness, but at Park Avenue it can be both
Hmm.
fully. And when she said that, that just, I mean, whatever aspect of your identity, it's just that's been very redemptive and healing as well.
Well, and our first conversation was back right in Georgia when they had passed these super restrictive laws on abortion. And that was what, a year and a half ago.
Yep.
And I was preaching theology that is about consent and is about us choosing, and particularly is about how the soul and the human and the body happens in the Bible with breath, with the breath. So it is in fact a new and super politicized way to think about life, if we think about actual life in the womb and in the body. And so kind of was putting myself out there from the pulpit, and you came up to me and
In tears,
just
probably.
in tears and said how affirmed that you felt in that moment, and that you had never felt that at church. And
I had never felt my body so fully affirmed from the pulpit before. And that message has continued across the year and a half or whatever year that I've been at Park Avenue with various preachers and various series and various messages that your body is not sin or shame. You don't need to control and oppress and manage your body. Your body is your friend. Your body is a person and they are your friend. You are on the same team. And
mhm,
that's easy to say as an able bodied person, because I know lots of folks who have chronic health issues and disabilities who are like, you can say that. I don't ever feel it because I'm in a constant battle with just trying to exist without pain in my body. And I want to hold that for those folks. But I also want, and not but, and I also want to affirm that your body isn't shame. Like that theology of your body's broken and full of sin and you need to cast it off and you need to just, work through it and pull yourself up and just go. Like
yeah,
that's that's really sad theology because it creates such a heavy dissonance between this whole being that God created and put us in. Like someone else I heard said, instead of seeing your body as a shell that your soul exists in and like moves around in, they're together.
right. Well, and I think I'm always like, man, theologically, yeah, I think that if we think of Jesus as less as fully divine and fully human, right? Like Jesus was not a walking God suit. Um, you know, and we are not essentially the same thing. We're not like soul suits,
I'm
that
gonna
we
use
actually
that now.
are a
Soul
body.
suit.
Soul suit sounds weird. But but yeah, that in our being and whatever we find ourselves, I thank you so much for saying those who live with chronic illness, and those whose bodies seem to be fighting them, right? Or that we are whole in all of that. And I think that that's in a basic way what we're talking about with mental health. Those of us, myself, living with chronic depression, I am whole. You
Yes.
and your diagnosis, you are whole. Everyone that we've talked to this month, every person in the world who is living with mental illness, they are whole.
There
And
there
it
is not
don't
a I
keep
gotta fix.
talking about that. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's not like I gotta fix myself and then I'm whole.
Right.
It's not I gotta do X, Y, and go to therapy and take medication and then I'm whole. No,
Mhm.
you are whole
Well, and
just
in
as you
in
are.
common ways that mental illness really is like accepted in our culture, with like body dysphoria and obsession with thin bodies. You are whole. You are whole in your journey, whatever that is. We keep saying it during this pandemic. You are whole. You do not have to be, uh, you know, thinner or more well or anything after this. We are in a worldwide pandemic right now where everyone's anxiety triggers are being tapped into. And so how do we in this time really affirm that we are whole? We are whole.
Amen. Amen.
Oh, hey, Liz, you just bring it out.
Thanks.
You
I
do.
mean, I love these types of conversations, whether they're public or private. Like, this is what I mean, this is what I thrive off of. Like, circling back, and I know we're kind of trying to wrap up. We're gonna spend the next hour wrapping up. Just
We're
kidding.
gonna wrap up in the wrap up.
uh, is
Soul suits.
hashtag soul suits. Oh,
In
one of the
conclusion, soul suits.
one of the things that I use and it's a very carefully boundary oriented thing of like healing is engaging in these conversations with people in big ways and little ways. Like I admin this Facebook group where a lot of our conversations touch on virtually everything that we discussed today. There's a wide variety of conversations on them, and getting to facilitate that and help bring that to life and have a space where people can ask really hard questions and process hard and uncomfortable things and unlearn and relearn together is is really cool. And I do a lot, like I thrive a lot more when it's one-on-one, like right now. um but that's another thing, is like learning and being and sharing in vulnerability with other people, because vulnerability is a two-way street. It can't be a one-way street. If it's a one-way street, then it's an unhealthy dynamic. It has to go both ways.
Well,
And
and let
that's
me plug that I would have this conversation any day of the week.
hmm
And conversations like this one happen weekly in different formats. So Park Ave has a weekly wellness check-in. I would promote activist theology, which also does a sort of intention setting on Monday. And ours happens on Wednesday. And, there are many ways to do this type of conversations. Again, those aren't public, those are forums. You need to, if you want to email me or Liz, at social at parkavbaptist.com, or Darcy at parkavbaptist.com, or Liz at parkavbaptist.com. You can get the information for any of those spaces to seek conversations like this, ones that you know that are open ended. We're not saying, and this is the one solution that you have to do.
like that a thing I used to go to at the church I was at in Laramie, Whitewater Christian Church. There was a fellow, he moved, so he's not there anymore, but he used to host a roundtable forum before church every Sunday morning. And our tagline, our motto was, "This is where you open the can of worms. This is where
I
you
love
have
that.
the freedom to ask the really hard question, to say the uncomfortable thing, to express. I can't sit with large portions of the Old Testament." There were folks who said that around that table, and I had never heard someone iterate those feelings at a church before, to say, "I can't read that passage anymore. I can't sit with that anymore. I don't know what to do." Um, those are life giving, because it really was a non judgmental place for people to express a variety of viewpoints and experiences and thoughts and input. And that's a whole other story. That experience at that church and that table was highly formative in where I am now.
That's great. That's awesome. Well, Liz, we just are so grateful for you. I say we. I am grateful for you, and I can speak, I think, for the Park Ave community, and just say you're a gift, and thank you for sharing your experience. Thank you for journeying with us. Thanks for for doing all you do with like your full self.
You're welcome.
You do. You
And
do.
thank you for providing a safe and brave place to do that.
Yes, the community does that.
Yes.
And the brave space, like Mickey Scott Bay Jones says. And so this has been our what are Wednesday meditations that have evolved for the month of May into mental health awareness conversations. With those of us who are experts on ourselves, and open and willing to share. And so next week at around this time, we pushed back this meeting because of some things in my schedules in my life, and I thank you, Liz, for being able to do that. And so next week we will have Reverend Renetta Hobson on to talk about all that she does, and the spaces that she occupies and the ways that she is such a healing presence for so many. And we're just so lucky to have people like Lizz Hutchinson and Renetta Hobson and Jamie Gethers, all on our team and journeying together with the Park Ave community. So thank you again, Lizz, for being here.
Welcome.
Any last things you want to say?
You just put me on the spot.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Skin suit. Skin suit.
Skin soul
suit. That's what I said. Soul suit. Soul suit.
World peace, man. I don't know.
No, you're amazing. You've said it all. And I appreciate you. And so thank you all. Thanks for tuning in. For those of you who will listen now and later.
This is the last thing I will say. If y'all have free time and you're tired of watching things on Netflix, I'll go to PBS and check out their special series on Islander, Asian, Pacific Islander. I don't remember all the words now, but they have a special series on the history of Asian Pacific Islander diaspora across history, specifically involving the United States. I have a couple Asian friends who have recommended it. It's on my list. Go watch it. Super educational. You'll learn a lot of stuff that you didn't know.
Amazing. Lizz, you're always growing and seeking to expand your ways of knowing. So thank you. Thanks for that example.
You're welcome.
All right. We'll see y'all next week.
Bye.
Bye.